Yeah, I was blown away by this game, alright? Blown away by how bad the game is, that is. Empires games is built upon the combat of the original game, but there is a heavier emphasis on pace capturing, and in Dynasty Warriors 9 Empire, the game focuses a lot on siege battle. In fact, it's the only type of battle you will be seeing in this game, not counting the historical event battles. There are 4 types of bases to capture. A normal base where any icon is a base that mainly spawns soldiers and captains to be sent to the front line. A base with a ram icon is a base that will spawn siege rams to break down the castle gate. A base with a tower icon is a base that will spawn siege tower to help you climb over the castle walls. A base with the catapult icon is a base that spawns catapult to help attacking other bases. Whether you're on the attacking or the defending side, your main job in a battle will be to capture these bases as fast as you can, as it's the only way to advance the battle and force the enemy's commander to come out. For the attacking side, in order to force the enemy commander to come out, you will need to open the castle gate, either by letting the siege rams taking down the gate or climb over the castle wall via the siege tower. You can also use the grappling hook to climb over the wall, but that option is disabled until the gate is down or at least one siege tower already reached the castle wall. For the defending side, your job is a lot easier as you only need to either capture all the bases aside from the enemy's main camp or reduce the enemy soldiers to 0, which is done via capturing bases and defeating the enemy's officers over and over again. But just capturing bases alone would make for a very repetitive gameplay really fast, so to somewhat shake things up, you can choose a secret plan pre-battle, and at the start of the battle, you will be given an objective to accomplish. The objectives have a very heavy amount of variety, ranging from simply capturing certain bases or defeating certain officers to protecting certain bases or captain for a certain amount of time. After accomplishing this objective, the plan will be initiated and changing the battle into your favor. The plan's effect can range from just a simple buff or debuff to summoning tornadoes or raining down ice spikes upon the enemy. The enemy can also carry out a secret plan of their own, so you also need to be on alert and stop their plans before it's too late. I thought the siege battles were one of the few good points of the original Dynasty Warriors 9, so I'm glad that it got expanded here. I really do. But then here comes my first gripe with the game. They really messed up the balance of the battle to be heavily against the player. In older Empires game, you need to advance your supply line until it reaches the enemy main camp, otherwise you won't be able to capture the enemy main camp or defeat the enemy commander. And while deep in the enemy supply line, you and your allies are weakened and prone to be captured if defeated. The same holds true for the enemy. So there's a layer of strategy you need to be aware of when approaching battles, as the right base captured at the right time can force the enemy forces to completely abandon their advance or even giving you the chance to wipe out the majority of the enemy forces. The same strategic thinking can't be applied to 9 Empires. The allies are useless and can't capture a base on their own most of the time, constantly get defeated, and your own base got overwhelmed by the enemy all too often. The enemy officers got to respond way too fast that any bases that I captured will be retaken shortly after I move elsewhere. The constant need to carry out your secret plans while stopping the enemies, combined with the constant barrage of enemies' onslaught, makes the game rather annoying and repetitive to play after a while, because it would eventually devolve into killing everything as fast as you can until the enemy soldier count reaches 0 and stop pestering you. And in my opinion, the combat is the best part of this game. It's just gonna get worse from here on out, so brace yourself. One new thing that got introduced in this game is the Officer Skill cards. You can use these cards anytime in the middle of battle to carry out various effects from a temporary buff, recovering HP, to a powerful offensive attack. I said new because this is totally not a dumbed down version of stratagem cards from previous Empires game, which not just provide set effects I just listed, but also other effects that actually change the entire battle and even a little cool cutscene to boot too. Anyway, back to 9 Empire skill cards. You start out with only 4 cards in your starter set and will eventually unlock more cards as you play through the game. How do you unlock more cards, you may be wondering? You get 1 random card as victory spoil after winning a battle. Random. Or you can also be given 1 random card when your close ones like spouse or swan siblings or your parents randomly want to interact with you. Keyword here, random. Also, the cards come in tiers too, ranging from common, rare, legendary to epic. How do you gain cards of higher tier, you might ask? I don't know. Everything is just random. In here, why does everything have to be a gacha nowadays? Aside from skill cards, there's also another gacha mechanic in the form of artifacts and gems. The artifacts determine the element of your attacks, the number of gem slots, as well as the tier of weapons you can equip. The rarer the artifact, the more powerful it is. On paper, the artifact is just a harmless piece of equipment, except it isn't. 2 out of 6 elements it provides, fire and wind, literally break the combat system of the game. To understand why I said so, you must first understand the combat system of the game. So I'm gonna shamelessly reuse the explanations I did for my short defense of the original Dynasty Warriors 9 here. Flow attack is basically just the normal attack, but instead of just one normal attack string, the character now has several attack strings depending on the enemy state. There's the flow attack string for when the enemy is standing normally. There's the flow attack string for when the enemy is in the air. There's the flow attack string for when the enemy is stunned. There's the flow attack string for when the enemy is knocked down. And to complement these new attack strings that depend on the enemy stakes, we have the trigger attacks. These trigger attacks can be executed by pressing the R1 button combined with either square, triangle, or X. R1 plus square is the attack to temporarily stun the enemy. R1 plus triangle is the attack to launch the enemy into the air. R1 plus X is the attack to knock the enemy down. So, you're up to speed with how the combat of the game plays out, right? Then let me explain how I think the fire and wind artifacts break the game's combat system. When you equip these artifacts, your trigger attacks will create element attacks that knock the enemy into the air. Yep, they knock the enemy into the air. For a combat system that solely depends on the state of the enemy to determine what attacks you can carry out, what made them think that it is acceptable to have a piece of equipment that effectively renders half of the movesets unusable? What were they thinking? Did they even test their own game? Gosh! Moving on, gems are equipment that grants various bonuses to your stats, ranging from increasing HP, attack, to auto muscle recovery over time, but for some unholy reason, increasing attack speed isn't an option among them. You know, the one must-have bonus that everyone and their mother seek to have on their weapons ever since its introduction in World RG 1 back in 2007. The one bonus that makes heavier weapons more bearable to be used. The only bonus that allows you to do crazy stuff like this. Why is it not here? Combat isn't all there is to an Empires game though. There's also these things called domestic system, where you carry out various political tasks like improving the economy or agriculture of your territories, levy your territories for money and supplies, bolster the defense of your territory or sabotage the enemies, recruit or drill your troops, employing free officers or even officers of the enemy forces, scoring alliances with your neighbors, or participating in a coming battle. In one interview, Suzuki B, The producer of the game said that he will make the domestic system to be closer to that of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms series, a historical simulation strategy game series by the same company, which has 14 mainline titles at the time of this recording and has gone through multiple domestic systems of varying degree of depth. Super underrated series, by the way. Please do check them out if you can. If you're a traveler from a very distant future, I might even have made some reviews on the series. Maybe. I don't know. So that means the domestic system in Nine Empires will be a very deep one to write. Remember the list of things about the domestic system I just listed out just now? That's actually all the domestic thing you can do in this game. It's the most basic, most bare-bones domestic system the series have had ever since 4 Empires way back in 2004. And at least 4 Empires has the excuse of being the first in the series. Facility upgrading, what's that? Base building, never heard of it. Strategy and planning, I don't know what you're talking about. The Empire series has had 5 Dynasty Warriors titles and 3 Samurai Warriors titles. I could live with the game not evolving much, but why the hell did it evolve instead? Code A! Anyway, every month you can choose to do one action. Exactly, only one action to be carried out that month. And you, only you, will be the one to do the labor work the majority of the time. Your other 93 allied officers more often than not does not do anything at all to help with improving your territories, and God forbid if you play as a subordinate, as the ruler AI is not smart enough to know that the more officers it has, the less money it receives, and it really like to recruit more officers to the point of bankrupting its entire force. Speaking of recruiting, there's this one thing that I absolutely hate in this game. That is, for each territory under your control, there needs to be at least one officer stationed there. Which makes sense, I suppose. I mean, someone needs to be present to govern things after all. But then here's the problem. In this game, after you successfully invade the capital of the enemy's force, the rest of the enemy's territories will fall into your hands too. Since you only invaded the capital, your invading officers are only stationed in said capital, so all other new territories don't have anyone stationed there to govern over them, right? That kinda violated the rule of at least one officer per territory I just mentioned earlier, right? So how does the game solve this problem? By making all of the enemy officer stations in those territories automatically surrender to you. You have tales of characters like Zhang Wei, who was so loyal to his kingdom that even after his ruler has already surrendered, he still leads a remnant of his force to fight a suicidal war against his enemy, and yet, because of a damn absolutely avoidable rule, this game treats everyone like freaking cowards who will gladly throw away their pride and loyalty to kneel down against their enemy just because they lost a pile of mere minutes ago. Sorry, I'm getting off topic though. Let's get back to the domestic thing. Anyway, instead of wasting your one precious action of the month on the inconsequential domestic stuff, you can waste it on interacting with other characters instead. How do you interact with other characters? You're probably not asking that, but I'm gonna explain it anyway. By clicking on this option, you will be transported to the open world. You know, the empty, ugly open world of the original game which everyone and their mother hates. That one. While here, you can talk with another character, be greeted with a loading screen, see a short scene of you and other character next to a table with ugly, low poly meals that lasts a few seconds at best, got greeted with yet another loading screen, and then see you being transported back to where you were a few seconds before. The interacting thing can absolutely all be done via menu. It's what's been done since 7, and it also can be done here in this very game too. The open world is literally unneeded here. Suzuki, I know you said that you and your team decided to keep the open world because many requested so, but you know what else that a lot of people were very vocal about? You know how the open world is just so ugly and empty and half-baked and underutilized? So just why did you think it's a good idea to just leave the open world in as it is and make it even more empty? Like, why? You know what would be a good use for the open world without doing any modification to it at all? By chopping up locations into its own place and gives the player the option to travel to those locations via menu only. That way you don't need to load up the entire open world and forces the player to see the loading screen every time. Nobody is going to miss all this ugly emptiness, trust me on that. Man, I was so looking forward to see how they fix the open world aspect. I thought it was gonna be like Romance of Three Kingdoms 10 where you can get requests from people to go all over the map to accomplish requests. And while you're traveling, you can bump into other characters who are also doing something on their own too and maybe visiting different locales to be able to go shopping and buy stuff that only that locale has. Because God forbid me from having hope and dreams, huh? Speaking of shopping, earlier I said that you could only randomly gain gems from winning a battle, didn't I? Well, actually you can buy and sell gems via menu when you're in the console, and the act of buying and selling doesn't cost any action point. Finally, something that I can't fault the game. Except that they botched this up too. When you bought a gem, there's no pop-up notifying you what kind of bonuses the gem you just bought has, and it just went straight into your inventory without your consent. And amidst the sea of gems you've gained from battles, how the hell would you know what gem you just bought? This is such a basic thing in a video game transaction and they still manage to mess it up, like how? But that's not all, there's an option to sell unwanted gems, but the money you can gain from selling gems is a big fat zero. Look at the price when you want to buy, and now look at the price when you want to sell. Well, at least surely they have fixed the clone problem from the original 9 by decloning some of the characters, right? I mean, that's clearly what the DLC weapons are for, right? Yeah, about that. They just put the DLC weapons on the designated character and called it a day. They didn't bother to make a new Musou attacks for these DLC weapons, and they even go out of their way to make it so when you create a custom character using DLC weapons, the Musou attacks are default to a second set of weapons. In an edit mode, they absolutely refuse to let you choose your preferred Musou for your characters. Go! Okay, calm down. At least the edit mode must be good, right? I mean, they literally just brought the system from Neo 2 over, right? That game has one of the best create a character system I've ever seen in a video game, so there's absolutely no way they can mess it up, right? Right? Right! So, seeing how the gameplay department isn't exactly stellar, you would think that the writing department would pick up the slack, right? Yeah. Empires games don't have traditional story mode like the original Dynasty Warriors game, since it's more of an open sandbox for the players to play in. The game lives and dies by how rich the character interactions or how random events play out, and unfortunately, Nine Empires is also very poor in this department. Cutscenes events are very few and in between, with only 29 in total, and when you do manage to trigger an event, somehow quite a few of them plays out like this. No, I didn't shyly edited the cutscene to make the game look bad. That's how it plays out in the game. There are no dialogues whatsoever. The jump cut is all over the place. The frame rate is abysmal. And the most damning thing is how the loading time lasts longer than the cutscene itself. You might think that I'm just nitpicking here, but nope, I'm serious. Let's take a look at a few other cutscenes too. Putting the cutscene events aside, even the normal dialogue events don't fare any better at all. In 7 Empires, you would get a lot of random events popping up throughout your playthroughs, ranging from being invited to a local martial arts tournament to being asked to deal with a tiger terrorizing the people in the vicinity. All of that is nowhere to be seen in this game. The only events I see taking place are characters asking you to come with them to a place to talk, or surprised to see you being nearby, or just invite you to a simple meal. And most of them have super generic dialogues devoid of any character's unique personality, and when they do try to show off the character's personality, it just plays off that one quirk of the character and makes them incredibly one-dimensional. Compare it to the other latest Empires game, Samurai Warriors Empires, which not only has loads of events, even personalized ones, its dialogues also take into great consideration of who is saying the line. Even the NPCs also shown love by some having unique models made up of custom characters parts and having unique lines to show that they are actual characters in their own right and not just a 3D model with generic flavor text in a tasteless video game. I could somewhat forgive the generic writing and lack of interesting random events if the game is at least fast-paced enough for me to ignore it, but almost everything I do in this game leads to a loading screen. Get into a battle, loading screen, finishing a battle, loading screen, interacting with another character, loading screen, fast traveling, loading screen, transitioning from one move to the next, also loading screen. Why are there so many loading screens here? What the heck? Go A! From the footages I've been showing, you probably could see for yourself that this game doesn't look good, like, at all. But rest assured, all dear travelers from the distant future, it gets a lot worse. The game takes Dynasty Warriors 9 as the base to be built upon, so the ugliness of the open world is a given. But it didn't improve on the performance at all. In fact, somehow it got worse. The game struggles to maintain a constant frame rate and regularly shuts itself whenever too many effects are shown on screen. Enemies constantly popping in and out of the screen, and the background takes several seconds to load its texture whenever a cutscene pops up. Sometimes it doesn't even bother to load the texture at all. For the original Dynasty Warriors 9, I could at least understand the excuse of it being an actual open world game and the dev team just isn't experienced enough with the genre to optimize the game. But for this game, what's the excuse? 9 Empires is released 3 freaking years after the original Dynasty Warriors 9. The optimization and performance should see improvements, not the other way around. And as I mentioned earlier, the event cutscenes are done very shoddily, like they were made by amateurs who just touched on editing software for the first time. Samurai Warriors 5, a game made by the same company, released earlier this year, has graphics and performance leagues better than this game. I am not someone who values graphics or anything, and I know that there are different development teams for Samurai Warriors and Dynasty Warriors games, so how a Samurai Warriors game looks shouldn't be the standard to judge a Dynasty Warriors game, but this is just embarrassing. I play on the PS4 and maybe the game fares a lot better on the PS5 or something, I don't know. With that said though, it's pretty cool to see how cutscenes take place at where your characters are, not gonna lie.
憧れのあなたと誓いを結べるなんて夢にも思いませんでした。
この地は私たちの絆。改めてこの地に誓おう。
At least this one aspect should be saved from criticism, right? Even at their worst, Dynasty Warriors games have always at least have good OST, so this one must be good too, right? Right? Right! Actually, yes, the OST is good, I have no complaints about it. The game has the OST of the original Dynasty Warriors 9, a lot of songs from past titles, and even a few new original ones too, so by default, the OST should be good, but that only applies to the OST itself. It's how the game uses its OST that I'm going to complain about. I'm going to play a short scene and see if you could notice what's wrong.
Ahem. これをそなたに送りたいと思う。心のままに使ってほしい。
If you think that the problem is how one line of dialogue is unvoiced while another is voiced, yeah, that is a problem, but that is not what I'm going to talk about. The music used in the short scene is called TALESBOX, the music that is played in Dynasty Warriors 8 gallery mode. Here is how the song plays out after the part that was played in the short scene earlier. Notice how the music got livelier right afterward. The scene is just too short for the player to absorb in the music, and the music choice, while it seems fitting at first, actually doesn't, because TALESBOX is not a song played when two people sharing an intimate moment with each other. It's a song that plays when you are going over your accomplishment, recounting the events that happened, and relive the epicness that happened in the past long gone. But that example of TALESBOX isn't what pissed me off the most. It's this one.
この地は譲らねえぞ。あの城を落とさずし して天下をつかめぬ。速やかに制圧せよ。
That song you just heard just now is a song called The Epic Remains Forever, and it's not just any song, it's the song for the final battle of the original Dynasty Warriors 9. When I first heard the song pops up while playing, I was really confused for a good few seconds because I was nowhere near the final battle of the game. I was just doing a normal invasion like any other invasions before. Then it hit me. I was invading Chengdu. The game didn't register The Epic Remains Forever as the song that plays for the final battle. Instead, it registers the song as just a song that plays when a battle takes place at Chengdu, because the final battle of the original Dynasty Warriors 9 takes place at Chengdu. Sure, the song itself is still good, but by treating it as just another song in the list of battle theme songs, it completely ruins the meaning of the song. The game just doesn't understand its own music, like at all, is what I want to say, and because of that, in spite of me thinking that the OST itself is good, I have to say that the game fails to utilize its good OST to the fullest potential. I have been really negative throughout this review, so you probably would expect me to not enjoy the game like at all, right? Yes, and also kinda no. Yes, my experience with the game was not very pleasant, and I think that this is the worst Empires title ever since 4 Empires. But the messed up thing is that, to an extent, I still enjoyed the game. Ignoring the dumb AI that makes everything a lot more annoying than it should be, I genuinely enjoy the combat, because it's just the combat from Dynasty Warriors 9, which I think, while very flawed, is a breath of fresh air compared to the decades-old off-stray and triangle charge system of the old Musou games. The game moving away from sublime live battle system of the old Empires games and instead focuses on siege battle is also a very welcoming change too, as it finally gives back a little bit of the feeling of you being a warrior in the middle of the battlefield instead of a one-man army. But unfortunately, that feeling is kinda ruined because the new combat system is just way too busted, and the pacing of the battle is just too hectic at times that it just devolves back into a button mashing fest after a while. Even though severely limited in the wardrobe department, the edit mode is the best it has ever been, and it's really fun to mess around, and recreating officers from Blast or RTK portraits is hella enjoyable. If I hadn't played Neo 2 first, I would look at this edit mode very favorably. In fact, I think that's what ultimately sours my experience with this game, as the game keeps reminding me of better games that I've played in the past, and see just how much potential the game wasted. I had really high hopes for this game, as the promotional materials and interviews made it seem like it will be the combination of what made past games good. But what I got was a Frankenstein's monster of mechanics stolen from past games. If anything, it kinda made me appreciate the original Dynasty Warriors 9 more, because at least that game tried to do new things. It's just that their development efforts were horribly misplaced and the result ended up not so good. The game could maybe turn out good with future updates, I doubt it, but who knows. Dynasty Warriors 9 was very horrible at launch too, but with all the patches, it's not that bad anymore. I even made a short video talking about why I think so, actually, link in the description if you're curious. Man, I'm gonna be very pissed if they do a power-up kit expansion for this game later down the line. And knowing Koei, I think the chance of them doing so is actually pretty high if anything. Dynasty Warriors 9 is the worst Empires title since 4 Empires, a Frankenstein's monster of mechanics and system from other better games, with a few good ideas ruined by poor execution or questionable design choices and poor game performance. If you're thirsty for an Empires title, you better look elsewhere. Samurai Warriors 4 Empires is really good, and I bet you can find it pretty cheap nowadays if you know where to look. If I were to give scores to the game, it would look something like this. Hey, on the bright side, Dynasty Warriors 6 was literally an unfinished mess of a game, and 7 ended up being my favorite title in the whole series. So maybe the next game will make the series great again, who knows? Man, I can't wait to be disappointed by Dynasty Warriors 10.